everyone! Welcome to part 2 of the Johto region review. I hope y'all are excited because today we're going to be covering the 7 categories of the Johto region review. If you have not seen part 1 of this review, please check this little area at the top of the screen. Click on that, it'll reroute you over to the part 1 video. Please go watch that video first, okay? That video takes up a massive part of this review, and it's imperative that you watch that one first so that you're getting the full scope of this deal, right? Once you're done, come meet us back here and finish up with part 2, okay? Please go check out part 1 first. Anyway, I'm Sabrina and you're watching Saffron City TV. Welcome back. Okay, are y'all ready to get into this review? I'm super excited to finish it up. We've got 7 more categories to cover. Make sure you've got a snack, something to sip on, you're wearing something comfy, and let's get right into it, shall we? Traversability and Transportation. Johto offers a few ways to traverse it. Unfortunately, the running shoes aren't a thing yet in Generation 2, so you're going to be trekking quite slowly until you get to Goldenrod City. On the other hand, Gen 4 will provide you with the running shoes in Cherry Grove City, which makes traversing the region a bit quicker and, in my opinion, more enjoyable while running around with your Pokemon in the games. Once the player gets to Goldenrod, they'll be given a bike for free from the scammer with a heart of gold. Just kidding, he's getting free advertising. He does give us a free bike, and that's pretty cool of him, I suppose. The bike obviously allows faster travel throughout the region in both generations. Your own Pokemon also help you traverse the region with the use of HMs like Surf, Fly, and in Gen 4, Rock Climb. HMs are absolutely necessary in both gens as well, and compared to modern mechanics like Ride Pokemon, HMs are a bit inefficient, requiring a Pokemon in your party that can learn them and using up one of their move slots. Unfortunately, you'll need to accommodate for necessary HMs, which can be pretty inconvenient at times as you'll have to plan your party of Pokemon around them. But there are other forms of transportation here too. Goldenrod and Saffron City are connected by the Magnet Train, a high-speed railway providing convenient travel between Johto and Kanto. To board the train, passengers require a pass, only obtainable from the copycat in Saffron City in exchange for returning her lost Pokédoll. Initially, the train is non-operational due to a Team Rocket member stealing the machine part from the Kanto power plant. Once the machine part is recovered by the player and returned to the power plant in Kanto, the Magnet Train will resume its services. So, unfortunately, the player won't be able to utilize this service until they've beaten the game, but it's still a convenient form of transportation regardless, once all of the criteria are met to use it. The same is true for the ferry service offered at the port in Olivine City. Here, the SS Aqua will only ferry the player from Olivine to Vermilion City on Mondays and Fridays. However, it'll only transport the player from Vermilion to Olivine on Sundays and Wednesdays. So unless you're planning on traveling on those specific days, you'll have to find other ways to get between the regions. I really like this transportation system because it has a set schedule, mirroring how things would kind of work in the real world. In reality, you can't teleport anywhere at any time, and Johto's realistic travel schedules makes it feel that much more immersive. As far as traversability is concerned, the forking pathways through the routes offer some intrigue, as the player can travel the routes differently each time they pass through. And once the Sudowoodo is removed from Route 36, the player is able to easily go between Violet City, Goldenrod, and Ecruteak. Not to mention that after Ecruteak, the player can also kind of choose which direction and which part of the storyline they want to tackle next. You can either go southwest to Olivine and Cyanwood, or you can go east towards Mahogany Town and Blackthorn. Granted, you'll still have to visit both areas in order to complete the game, but it's really nice that the developers kinda allow the player some autonomy in this area. So, for Traversability and Transportation, I'd have to give Gen 2 a score of 2.5, Gen 4 a score of 3.5, leaving Johto overall with a score of 3. Since the player can't access all of Kanto until after they've beaten the champion of the region, that means you don't really get to utilize the Magnet Trainer SS Aqua during the initial playthrough of Johto, which is fine. They were implemented strictly to make traveling between the two regions simpler and tend to make the games feel more immersive, so both generations received a half point for them. Gen 4 added the running shoes, and having walking Pokemon in the game certainly added to the enjoyment of utilizing the running shoes. Gen 4 hasn't really made any other changes to improve upon the traversal mechanics that feel pretty bare bones in Gen 2. However, the routes and the autonomy the player has in these games feel really nice here in Johto. And while Johto overall scored slightly above average in this category, that's not to say that traversing the region is unenjoyable, just that the ways you go about it feel pretty dated. Alrighty, moving on. Exploratory Incentives. Johto is packed full of content with tons of incentives to explore the region. And while every region has TMs and items strewn about and hidden in places off the beaten path, why else should we explore outside of the necessary storyline locations? Well, Johto's got you covered in this category. Kurt, the Pokeball craftsman in Azalea Town, needs apricorns to make his unique Pokeballs, so technically hunting for apricorns is an exploratory incentives that the routes offer, in addition to the Day of the Week siblings. You and your Pokemon can take a break from your journey and hit up the Pokeathlon Dome in HeartGold and SoulSilver. Here, your Pokemon will compete in athletic competitions to win medals and points that can be exchanged for various prizes. An interesting change in HGSS is that apricorns now have a secondary use other than just being given to Kurt to be crafted into Pokeballs. You can blend these apricorns into juice that you can serve to your Pokemon, and this juice will affect and potentially enhance their athletic capabilities. We're all thinking it, but I'm not gonna say it out loud. The Safari Zone in HGSS provides a pretty massive exploratory incentive as well. This Pokemon Preserve allows the player to customize its layout with different zones that contain different biomes, with Pokemon unique to each one. Balba? I don't know. The owner presents the player with various challenges, and upon completion, he'll expand the Safari Zone a bit. You can play the slots or play Voltorb Flip at the Game Corner in Goldenrod to obtain Pokemon or unique TMs not found anywhere else. The Goldenrod Tunnel also has the Haircut Brothers that will groom your Pokemon, which increases your friendship with them. There's a woman down there selling herbs, and also a man runs a bargain shop on Monday morning selling valuable items at a discount. You can also dress up your Pokemon down here and take pictures with them too. Not to mention that there are certain Pokemon that can only be obtained by exploring the region meticulously. For example, you can only obtain a Tyrogue from the Karate King, Kiyo, and Mount Mortar, and you're really gonna have to explore the place well to find him. In addition, the only way to obtain Lapras is to visit the Basement 2 level of Union Cave on a Friday. And while Shuckle can be found elsewhere in the region, how could you turn down Shucky from Kirk in Cyanwood City? Bill will even gift the player an Eevee if you visit his home in Goldenrod after meeting him in Ecruteak. There's a man who lives on the northern side of the Lake of Rage, and he'll give you a TM if you're able to reach his home via the Tree Maze in Gen 2 or via the Aquatic Forest Maze in Gen 4. The Ruins of Alph are essentially one big exploratory incentive. However, there's a little more to it than what I discussed previously. In Gen 4, completing the first slide puzzle will reward the player with the Unknown Report. Once all 26 alphabetic unknown forms are caught and the first 7 pages of the report are completed, the exclamation point and question mark forms become available in the entrance room. These games feature puzzle chambers with hints on the far wall, and fulfilling specific criteria open secret rooms containing valuable items. Also, let's discuss the elephant in the room. Johto allows the player to explore the entire region of Johto as well. That's a big exploratory incentive right there. And how could we forget the other huge exploratory incentives of Johto, like the legendary Pokemon? In HeartGold, the player is required to encounter Ho-Oh as part of the storyline, and the same is true for SoulSilver and Lugia. However, in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, these legendaries are not required encounters, so if the player wishes to encounter them, they're going to have to search the Tin Tower and the Whirl Islands for them respectively. In addition, in order to obtain Lugia in HeartGold or Ho-Oh in SoulSilver, the player will need to beat the game and obtain either the Silver Wing or the Rainbow Wing, respectively, from a man in Pewter City in Johto. Then, the player can take those items to either the Whirl Islands or the Bell Tower and encounter these awesome legendaries. In all of the Johto games, however, the player can partake in the hunt for the roaming legendaries, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. After the player encounters them in the Burn Tower and they flee the structure, they can then be found roaming around the region in random areas. However, Suicune's line of travel is a little less random, as it appears in specific locations around the region. After leaving the Burn Tower, you can expect to encounter Suicune north of Cyanwood City, and then in Route 42, and then it'll move again to the entrance of National Park before finally it can be encountered at the base of the Tin Tower in Ecruteak. However, the process is a bit longer in Gen 4 in that instead of encountering it at Bell Tower, the player will have to visit Johto, specifically Vermilion City, and then Route 14, before it'll appear on Route 25 where you can officially battle and capture it. Next in Gen 4, you can get Kyogre in HeartGold and Groudon in SoulSilver. To access them, you must acquire either the blue orb or the red orb from Mr. Pokemon after obtaining the National Dex, and Kanto starters from Professor Oak. Rayquaza is also available in these games, but you'll need to have both Kyogre and Groudon, which means you'll need to trade for version exclusives, and then show both of them to Professor Oak to obtain the Jade Orb. Then you'll need to take the Jade Orb back to the Embedded Tower to encounter Rayquaza. Finally, you can encounter Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, and Mewtwo in Gen 4, however, they're all in Kanto, so I won't be deep diving into their locations, just know that they are certainly an exploratory incentive for those playing the Gen 4 games. So, for exploratory incentives, I'm giving Gen 2 a score of 4, Gen 4 a score of 5, leaving Johto overall with a score of 4.5. Gen 2 is just packed full of exploratory incentives as it is. This includes most of what was just mentioned in this category, and all of this content was packed into the games that were released in 1999 with Gold and Silver and the year 2000 with Crystal. That is so impressive to me. Johto is always giving you reasons to step off the beaten path, take your time with the region, find what's hidden in the nooks and the crannies, and continue to explore it until you've truly experienced all that it has to offer. And if you thought Gen 2 was really packing in the content, just consider how much more was added in HGSS. I decided to replay Pokemon Crystal and HeartGold before I completed this review, and it took me a long time because I just got sucked into all of the amenities that Johto is just dangling like a set of keys in front of my face. If the game makes you feel like you just have to stop and check out what is going on outside of the standard storyline, then I'd have to say that it's giving you some pretty great incentives to explore, and Johto most certainly does. Okay, moving on. Culture, lore, and immersion. Johto is anything if not wearing its culture on its sleeve. This region has a rich and robust history, but it isn't afraid to embrace the future either. When you look at Goldenrod City, a place that is absolutely flooded with things to do, places to go, hustle and bustle, and busy folk, you don't immediately think Johto is modern and being thrust into the age of technology at an alarming rate. And why is that? Well, just look at the other major locations around it. Ecruteak City, Violet City, and Azalea Town. It's as if Johto is telling its inhabitants not to forget where we came from. The odd thing about Johto is that the story of this place isn't rooted in its storyline at all. It's been 3 years since the events in Kanto occurred, since Giovanni was defeated. Now the remnants of Team Rocket seek to establish control in Johto. They begin by kidnapping Slowpoke from Azalea Town, where Slowpoke are most revered, and cutting off their tails to sell on the black market to fund their revival. After initial confrontations in the Slowpoke Well, Goldenrod City, and Ecruteak City, the player joins forces with Champion Lance to thwart the Syndicate's ambitions, defeating executives Petrol and Ariana at the Team Rocket HQ in Mahogany Town. Hijacking the Goldenrod Tower in a desperate attempt to contact Giovanni, Team Rocket encounters resistance from the player. Petrol's verbal slip reveals the real station manager's location in the Goldenrod Underground, allowing the player to free them. The player confronts Archer, Team Rocket's interim leader, in a final showdown, leading to the executives' vow to disband the organization. In other words, the player is fighting a weak and desperate Team Rocket in Johto, but their storyline is compelling and will likely become part of Johto history. However, the story of Johto that existed before their arrival is what's really interesting about the region. And it's not difficult to find either. There's legends of massive Bellsprout that are said to have aided in the construction of Sprout Tower. According to the tales passed down in Azalea Town, the town suffered a severe drought some 400 years ago. The drought was ended when a Slowpoke's yawn summoned some much-needed rain, and this event is believed to be connected to the creation of the Slowpoke Well. Ecruteak is a shining example of Johto really embracing and preserving its history, not only with its architecture, but in the legends told about this place. The Bell/Tin Tower and Brass Tower, constructed 700 years ago, were built to foster friendship and hope between people and Pokemon. But then, a lightning bolt struck the Western Tower about 150 years ago, burning it down to the ground. These towers, surrounded by rumors of legendary Pokemon, once attracted many visitors, but currently only the Burn Tower's ruins are accessible to trainers, while the Bell/Tin Tower remains restricted to the unworthy. The Burn Tower was once called the Brass Tower, with golden brass panels to match the Tin Tower's silver tin panels. This detail was unfortunately left out of the Gen 4 games, and the Tin Tower was renamed the Bell Tower, and consequently eliminating a bit of the context to the connection between these two buildings. Legend has it that Lugia once perched atop the Brass Tower. After the tower burned down, Lugia fled to the Whirl Islands, and Ho-Oh, which lived in the Bell/Tin Tower, flew away in search of a pure-hearted trainer. This fire resulted in the death of 3 unnamed Pokemon. Ho-Oh briefly returned to revive them after the fire was extinguished by sudden rains, transforming them into the legendary beasts Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, destined to roam the land. The events of the fire, the lightning strike, and the downpour are believed to be connected to these Pokemon. And while Gen 4 may have removed a little context between the brass and tin towers, it did add even more history with the kimono girls at the dance theater. In Gen 2, these ladies were simply opponents to be defeated for the prize of the Surf HM. However, in HGSS, their roles have been expanded. Zuki can be found in Violet City after the player delivers an egg to one of Professor Elm's aides. Naoko is the kimono girl located in the Ilex Forest. Miki is in the dance theater being bullied by a Team Rocket member. Kuni can be found in the Goldenrod Tunnel during the radio tower incident, and Seo is stuck on the ice in the ice path. But that's not all that they do. They've been silently witnessing the player's journey and aiding the player behind the scenes. After the player obtains all 8 Johto gym badges and the Master Ball from Professor Elm, the Kimono Girls will reward them with the Title Bell or the Clear Bell after defeating them a second time. They will then travel to the Bell Tower or Whirl Islands and perform a special dance to summon Ho-Oh or Lugia so that the player may encounter them. The ruins of Alf offer a peek into the ancient civilization that initially interacted with the unknown, leading to the development of the first writing system. These ruins have a history dating back at least 1,500 years, making them one of the oldest and most ancient structures in the world of Pokemon. The player can learn more about this ancient civilization by solving each chamber puzzle and reading the messages displayed afterwards. In Pokemon Crystal, these messages altogether read, "Our words shall remain here for the ages. Thus, we shall erect a Pokemon statue outside. We humans must learn to walk in harmony with them. We depart for their sakes. They possess great insight and refuse the outside world." In HeartGold and SoulSilver, these messages altogether read, "Our clan engraved words in this place. Our clan created Pokemon statue outside. We humans need to walk with them. We leave here for the sake of them. They possess power to sense with mind and reject outside." Pretty neat stuff, huh? In Pokemon SoulSilver, the Whirl Islands history is revealed. They once formed a single landmass that became a battleground for 2 warring countries. Lugia, the island's guardian, grew agitated and split it into 4 pieces with lightning bolts before vanishing into the deep waterfall basin. Lugia hoped for the revival of the lost bond between people and Pokemon. The children of Olivine City's residents are told cautionary tales that kids who misbehave are sent to these islands. Legend has it that the Lake of Rage came into existence when a gathering of Gyarados unleashed a fierce storm. The resulting crater, brimming with rainwater, transformed into what we know now as the Lake of Rage. But to lighten the mood, the fisherman that lives near the Lake of Rage really loves Magikarp and will reward the player if they can show him a Magikarp larger than the largest one he has seen. And the rural essence of Johto is made evident by the Moo Moo Farm on Route 39. And in the cozy settings of Cherry Grove City, the isolated Azalea Town and Cyanwood City, and charming Mahogany Town nestled in the northern hills. So, for culture, lore, and immersion, I'm once again giving both Gen 2, Gen 4, and Johto overall a perfect and well-deserved score of 5. As you can see, Johto's storied history and culture is very evident in the way Johto presents itself. The people of Johto find joy in life's simple pleasures, whether it's leisurely strolling through National Park or relaxing on its benches and competing in the bug-catching contest or in the Pokeathlon Dome or indulging in activities like fishing and tending to their mill tank on their rural farms. They also take pride in sharing the region's rich history and legends with visitors who stop into their beloved towns and cities. Not even Team Rocket seems to really bother these folks, unless the nefarious group happens to actually accomplish their goals. And even then, life kinda just goes back to normal after they're gone. The people of Johto love their region, take pride in their home, aren't afraid to tell its ancient stories, and embrace the modern world and accept its influence, while remaining steadfast in remembering what makes this place so great. And in my opinion, Johto is one of the most immersive regions in all of Pokemon. Alright, let's move on to the next category. Pokemon Diversity. Before we start the review of this category, I'd like to make some important notes here. First off, I want to be clear, when I use the term Johto Pokemon in this review, I'm referring to Pokemon that were introduced in Generation 2 when Johto was introduced. So you may be thinking, well, isn't every Pokemon in Johto considered to be a Johto Pokemon? Technically, yes, but just know for the purposes of this review, I'm referring to Johto Pokemon as the 100 Pokemon that were introduced with Johto, and Kanto Pokemon as the original 151 Pokemon introduced with Kanto. Capiche? Secondly, Kanto introduced the first set of Pokemon, so it didn't need to be judged for new additions. However, starting from Johto and moving forward, I will be considering this aspect when evaluating the Pokemon Diversity category. This is because introducing new Pokemon is a key aspect of any new region. In my opinion, here's the deal. If you're going to add Pokemon diversity, then the diversity needs to be evident. Most of the new Pokemon should be accessible within the region they were introduced in. While there can be a few exceptions where some new Pokemon are rare or unavailable until after finishing the game, the majority of newly introduced Pokemon should be readily available to the player. Now, this is my subjective opinion, and while I aim to be as objective as possible, I believe that this perspective is at least reasonable, right? If you disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments. But regardless, Johto is going to be judged on how available the new Johto Pokemon are in the Johto region. And so will Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, and so on. Finally, I want to mention something that will not be affecting the score of Johto in this category, the Pokewalker. HeartGold and SoulSilver introduced the Pokewalker, which does offer some Johto Pokemon diversity, but that's an additional product, and I can't give Gen 4 points for that, since the Pokewalker doesn't have anything to do with the Johto region itself, other than the Pokemon that can be transferred over. And besides, factors outside of the region itself don't affect scoring anyway. So let's get into it. Johto, as far as Pokemon diversity is concerned, may make you feel like you're playing Kanto 2.0. There are a lot of Kanto Pokemon available in Johto. Because Johto is literally connected to Kanto, it makes sense that Kanto Pokemon would be found here. However, they're found here in abundance. Actually, you'll encounter more Kanto Pokemon than you will Johto Pokemon in both the Gen 2 and Gen 4 games. However, it seems that Game Freak really wants the player to utilize all of the new mechanics that they've introduced, and the incentive seems to be the Johto Pokemon themselves. This becomes apparent when you look at all of the different ways to encounter Pokemon in Johto. If you're only exploring the grass during the daytime, you might feel like you're seeing a ton of Kanto Pokemon. And you'd be right. The vast majority of the routes in most of the caves are absolutely dominated by Kanto Pokemon. Let's start with your typical grass encounters. On Route 29, the first route the player travels through, there is a 55% chance of encountering Pidgey, a 5% chance to encounter Rattata, and a 40% chance to encounter Sentret in the morning and during the daytime. This means that theoretically, you've got a 60% chance to encounter a Kanto Pokemon in this route, and only a 40% chance to encounter a Johto Pokemon. However, at nighttime, you'll have an 85% chance to encounter a Hoothoot, a Johto Pokemon, and only a 15% chance to encounter a Rattata. The day-night cycle was introduced in Gen 2 with the release of Pokemon Gold and Silver, though it's important to mention that the morning is also considered to be a separate time of day as well. You can see that this is an example of Game Freak incentivizing the player to explore in the morning and at nighttime in order to have a better chance of encountering Johto Pokemon like Hoothoot, Noctowl, Spinarak, Wooper, Sneasel, Misdreavus, Houndour, Ladybug, and Hoppip. In Crystal, this was improved upon by adding Johto Pokemon into the earlier routes like Phanpy, Teddiursa, and Snubbull, though it does remove others like the Mareep line, unfortunately. However, that doesn't really matter for scoring purposes because version exclusives don't count. Either way, it feels pretty frustrating to see the same Pokemon from Kanto take the main spotlight here in Johto, and although I used Route 29 to make a point about the availability of Johto Pokemon at different times of the day, this does not apply to every route in the game. And not only that, but there are a lot of repeat Kanto Pokemon all over Johto. You're going to be seeing a ton of the Pidgey line, the Rattata line, the Spearow line, the Bellsprout line, and the Zubat line, though Crobat was introduced in Gen 2, which does give you a Johto Pokemon to strive for. But weren't these the same repeat Pokemon all over Kanto too? Thankfully, Johto-centric places like Sprout Tower, the Burn Tower, Bell Tower, and Dragon's Den offer Johto Pokemon to go along with their themes.
So that was a fucking lie.
Yeah, I just lied to you. Actually, there are zero Johto Pokemon available in any of those places. This is ridiculous to me, and I would argue that the issue of repeat Kanto Pokemon is even more egregious in Johto than it is in Kanto, since 100 more Johto Pokemon were added to the roster in Gen 2, and Gen 4 does not improve upon this issue. As a matter of fact, Pokemon Crystal does a better job at making Johto Pokemon more available to the player early on than any other Johto-based game. That being said, you can still find plenty of Johto Pokemon if you do what Game Freak is incentivizing you to do, which is utilize the new mechanics. For instance, Headbutt trees. As mentioned earlier, you can teach your Pokemon the move Headbutt by speaking to a guy in the Ilex Forest. You can then approach a tree, sometimes it has to be a specific tree, and then the game will ask you if you want to Headbutt it. If you choose to do so, you're likely going to be in for a treat because most of the Pokemon found in these Headbutt trees are Johto Pokemon, like Spinarak, Aipom, Pineco, and Heracross. This is more evident in Crystal than in Gold and Silver, as they often have more Kanto Pokemon in them than the former, but Crystal's inclination to include more Johto Pokemon in these Headbutt trees was carried over into the Gen 4 games. Want to know another great way to encounter more Johto Pokemon? Well, in Gen 2, all you need to do is utilize the new Pokegear and register the phone numbers of some of the people you meet around the region, because occasionally they'll call you to let you know that there's a mass outbreak of Johto Pokemon in a specific area. Hiker Perry will call you about more Meryl at Mount Mortar. Bugcatcher Arnie will let you know that there are Yanma swarming on Route 35. Hiker Anthony really wants you to know all about the Dunsparce in Dark Cave. Fisher Ralph has seen a bunch of Quillfish on Route 32. And Fisher Wilton is really reeling in the Remoraid on Route 44. This is why you should get to know the people in Johto, because sometimes it's useful to answer their calls from time to time if you want to get your hands on some more Johtomons, that is. This is a little different in Gen 4 though. Here you'll need to obtain the National Dex after defeating the champion, and once you do that, tune into Professor Oak's Pokemon Talk via the radio app on the Pokegear to hear him discuss that swarms of different Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh Pokemon have appeared in different areas around the region. Surfing will also occasionally bring you some more of that Johto diversity with Wooper, Quagsire, Marill, and Mantine, but otherwise you're still going to be encountering a ton of Magikarp, Tentacool, and sometimes their evolutions as well. Fishing with the old rod is the typical Magikarp and sometimes Tentacool, but once you get the good rod in Olivine City, you'll be able to catch more Johto Pokemon like Chinchou and Corsola. But there's one thing about Johto that absolutely infuriates me. For some ungodly reason, Johto has so many Pokemon that made their debut with this region hidden behind Kanto. That's right, you'll have to travel to Kanto to encounter Johto Pokemon. This makes me so angry, I swear. And here's a good example of this. You cannot catch Quillfish, a mediocre at best water-type Pokemon in Johto, until you obtain the Super Rod from a guy in Lavender Town in Kanto.
Mediocre?
That means you'll never be able to use one in your normal playthrough of the Johto storyline unless you trade one over. And remember, trading does not count towards the score of Pokemon diversity. Now, if Fisher Ralph calls you about the swarm of Quillfish on Route 32, you can catch it with any rod in Gen 2, but otherwise, I'm telling you, this Pokemon has no business being unavailable until that late in the game. And by this point, you've already beaten the Elite Four and Champion, likely with way better Pokemon than Quillfish. But Quillfish isn't the only example of Johto Pokemon being unavailable until the post-game. No. You can go ahead and include Murkrow, Misdreavus, Sneasel, Slugma, Macargo, Houndour, Houndoom, Larvitar, Pupitar, Tyranitar, and Blissey in Gen 2. In Gen 4, thankfully, Misdreavus, Murkrow, and Larvitar are available in the Johto Safari Zone, and Primo will give you an egg that will hatch into Slugma given the correct phrases. Let's talk about the new baby Pokemon real quick. Thankfully, exclusive to Crystal, the owners of the daycare in Johto will now give you an odd egg with the chance of hatching one of 6 new baby Pokemon introduced in Gen 2. The Pokemon hatched from this egg also have a higher chance of being shiny as well, which was also a new feature introduced in Gen 2. Those Pokemon would be Pichu, Cleffa, Igglybuff, Elekid, Magby, and Smoochum. Thankfully, if you don't hatch an Igglybuff or a Smoochum, Jigglypuff and Jynx are both available in Johto before beating the champion. However, Pichu, Cleffa, Elekid, and Magby won't be available until you're able to catch their evolutions in Kanto. And yes, Magmar can be found in the Burn Tower in Gold and Silver, but not in Crystal where the odd egg is available. And while you don't get an odd egg in Gen 4, at least Clefairy, Electabuzz, and Magmar are available in the Safari Zone, so the only baby Pokemon you'll need to travel to Kanto to obtain would be Pichu. So, if Generation 2 added 100 Pokemon to the roster, and you can't obtain 16 of them, including Celebi, then that means 16% of the Johto Pokemon population is unavailable in Johto before beating the game. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but to me that is not an insignificant number when they are debut Pokemon. I'd even accept a Pokemon like Larvitar, the earliest in a pseudo-legendary line, to be unavailable until after the game has ended, but certainly not Quillfish. And those numbers don't even include the legendaries that are unavailable until the post-game, but it's totally acceptable to have most of the legendary Pokemon sequestered to the post-game. I don't really have an issue with that. Thankfully, Gen 4 did improve upon the unavailability issue with the addition of the Safari Zone, but it missed a big spot with the rest of the region. And listen, These Pokemon are not like super powerful, OP Pokemon that would allow you to just sweep through the game, okay? Most of the Johto unavailables have middling stats and would be better suited for the mid-game in a playthrough, not the post-game where you've already likely got a fully evolved Pokemon team. You don't need a Misdreavus after defeating the champion and obtaining 16 gym badges, unless you're trying to complete the Pokedex. And that's it. There's the money. That's what these new amazing Johto Pokemon have been relegated to, a Dex entry. And even if we look at the Johto Pokemon population before fully completing the games, Pokemon like Skarmory, Teddiursa, and Phanpy are left for Route 45, one of the last routes you'll likely travel down in your playthrough of Johto. So you're not going to be able to use them until you've driven Team Rocket out of Goldenrod, and even then, you're going to have to travel a pretty long way to get to them. I want to ask you, Game Freak, why can't Sneasel be available in Ice Path outside of just Pokemon Crystal? Why can't Misdreavus be found at night in the Burn Tower or the Bell Tower? Why can't Murkrow be found at nighttime near the Lake of Rage or in a headbutt tree in the Ilex Forest or something? Why can't Houndour be found south of Ecruteak? Instead, you gave us Zubat, Rattata, Bellsprout, Spearow, and Pidgey. And thank you for that, because we really needed those Pokemon to take the spotlight here in Johto. So, for Pokemon diversity, I'm giving Gen 2 a score of 2, Gen 4 a score of 3, leaving Johto overall with a crappy little score of 2.5, and I'm not sorry. I like the fact that Game Freak incentivizes the player to utilize the new mechanics by allowing you to find more Johto Pokemon. I think that's a really cool idea, and I fully respect that decision. But there's absolutely no reason why Kanto Pokemon should dominate Johto this heavily. I understand why there are a lot of Kanto Pokemon here, but there is nothing you can say to me to convince me that it was the best way to represent Johto's Pokemon diversity. Not only that, but Pidgey, Rattata, Zubat, Spearow, and Bellsprout repeat constantly in this region. I feel like Game Freak is just salting the wound and trolling us at this point. The only reason Gen 4 scored a 3 is because of the Safari Zone and the Safari Zone alone. If the Safari Zone hadn't been included, Gen 2 would have scored higher because of Crystal. Alright, rant over. Let's move on. Hi, sorry to interrupt your regularly scheduled programming. Y'all know the deal. This video is being sponsored by my blood, sweat, and tears, and if you appreciate the hard work that I put into it, why not like the video and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this from me? Make sure you've got that bell icon tapped so that you get notified whenever I upload a video, because I upload randomly. It's for my mental health. Anyway, I'm gonna stop yapping now. Let's get back to the video. Gym Leaders, Elite Four, and Trainer Classes. So, just like in the Kanto region review, I won't be discussing every single trainer class that appears in Johto, only the ones that fit the region exceptionally well or don't belong here at all. Trainer classes like bug catchers, lasses, hikers, and fishermen and whatnot aren't going to be mentioned because most of the time they'd be a good fit for any region. But Gym Leaders, the Elite Four, and the trainer classes should still represent the type of people found in the region and its demographics. Gym Leaders. Let's start with the Gym Leaders. One thing that you'll notice about the Gym Leaders here in Johto is that some of them don't even use Johto Pokemon. What a shame. And the first shining example of that is Faulkner, the Flying-type Gym Leader of the Violet City Gym. He, as a Flying-type Gym Leader, is perfectly fine for Johto, and I have no issues with his location. As a matter of fact, I don't have an issue with any of the locations of the Gym Leaders in Johto. They all fit really well into their respective cities and towns. But you know something funny about him being located in Violet City? Some of the sages at Sprout Tower have a Hoot Hoot, and Faulkner doesn't. As a matter of fact, he doesn't have any Johto birds on his team, which is very disappointing. Give him a Hoot Hoot and a Murkrow, and I'm happy. The fact that Faulkner only uses a single Kanto evolutionary line, being a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto, is basically just disrespectful to the Johto region. Thanks, Faulkner. I hate it. Next, we've got Bugsy, the Bug-type gym leader of Azalea Town. Oh goody, another Johto gym leader that only battles with Kanto Pokemon. Why, Game Freak? Why didn't you give Bugsy a Heracross? You can literally catch one right here in Azalea Town. I hate this. You had so many options, Bugsy. Lediba, Ledian, Spinarak, Ariados, Yanma, Heracross, Pineco, or Fortress. Though that one might be too difficult for the player to defeat this early on. And what did you choose? Metapod, Kakuna, and Scyther. Thanks. I hate it. And Bugsy is such a good fit for Azalea Town since it's right next to the Ilex Forest, where you can find Pineco and Heracross. Instead, Bugsy decided to get his Pokemon by participating in the bug catching contest in National Park. And I appreciate the recognition of the tradition, but he passed up a Yanma on the way there. Why not use a team of Pineco, Yanma, and Scyther? There were so many missed opportunities here. I am dying of disappointment. Whitney is the normal-type gym leader of Goldenrod City, and she's a pretty great gym leader. She has given so many trainers a run for their money and is one of the hardest gym leaders in the games. Her Miltank is, well, an absolute tank. And it's a Johto Pokemon as well. Granted, she does use a Kanto Pokemon, but it's a Clefairy, and it fits her cute pink Pokemon aesthetic, so Clefairy is fine here. Thankfully, she also uses a Miltank on her team, that's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, Whitney is an awesome gym leader who offers a great challenge here in Johto. Next up, we've got Morty, the Ghost-type gym leader of Ecruteak City. And I love the fact that he's located in Ecruteak. There's a lot of death implied in the history of the Burned Tower, and I think having a Ghost-type gym leader here makes a lot of sense. However, his team doesn't make a lot of sense. Ghastly can be found in the Bell/Tin Tower, so it totally makes sense that he has members of that evolutionary line on his team, but it comprises his entire team. I just don't get it, Game Freak. We took one step forward with Whitney and 2 steps back with Morty. Come on now. Since I think Misdreavus should be available in both the Burn Tower and in the Bell/Tin Tower anyway, I definitely think Morty should have a Misdreavus on his team. Not to mention that it's the only new Ghost-type Johto Pokemon introduced in the region. There's literally no reason for him to have 2 Haunters on his team and not a single Misdreavus. The disappointment is turning into resentment at this point. From this point, we can kind of pick our next gym leader to visit, and I personally usually choose to head towards Cyanwood City first, so we're going to start with the fighting-type gym leader, Chuck. How many gym leaders in Johto use exclusively Kanto Pokemon? Too many, including this guy. I like the fact that he sits below a waterfall to physically train his body. That's real dedication to fitness right there, folks. So I suppose it's kind of cool that he represents the combination of water and fitness by having a Poliwrath on his team. I actually think Poliwrath is a really great fit for Chuck, but I hate that he has a Primeape on his team. If we take the Primeape out of the equation and give him, I don't know, a Hitmontop, you know, a fighting type Pokemon that was introduced with Johto, then maybe his team would be more acceptable. We could probably also throw in a Heracross for good measure. Actually, he should have both of them on his team. I mean, come on now, Game Freak, you can do better than this. Next, let's talk about the cutest gym leader in Johto, Jasmine, the Steel-type gym leader of Olivine City. And I love Jasmine so much. She is so adorable, and she takes care of Amphi at the lighthouse, and clearly she cares about the lives and safety of the sailors arriving at the port. She's so incredibly sweet, and I love the fact that she uses a very intimidating and powerful Steelix on her team. She probably also listens to metal music. She's my favorite Johto gym leader by far. But alas, her team isn't perfect either, because while she does use an awesome Steelix on her team, she also uses 2 Magnemite. No, why, Jasmine, why? Why use 2 Magnemite instead of putting a Skarmory, Fortress, or Caesar on your team? This is such a missed opportunity. It makes me want to cry because I have so much respect for Jasmine. Stop the madness, please. I beg of thee. Jasmine deserves better than this, Game Freak. You owe her a steel crown for this. Alright, let's talk about Price now, the Ice-type gym leader of Mahogany Town. This older fella seems exactly like the type of person who would love the relaxing countryside of Mahogany Town, and I like the fact that his gym is located here. And Price actually uses a Johto Pokemon on his team, with his ace being Piloswine. Nice! However, he also has a Seal and a Dugong on his team. This, once again, is disappointing. Delibird is literally right there, and although nobody really likes Delibird and its present gimmick is a gimmick, it would still be better than a level 27 Seal. As a matter of fact, in Gen 4, it's a level 30 Seal. Somebody please explain to me why this was a good idea. It's not. It's not a good idea. Just give the guy a Delibird. He could teach it better moves without relying too heavily on present. Once again, a Johto gym leader that I like, not getting the team he deserves. Finally, we've got Claire, the Dragon-type gym leader of Blackthorn City. And she's great. Her team is full of aquatic dragons, and I think Game Freak did the best that they could with her. She may be a bit of a sore loser, but at least her team is fine by me. They only introduced one new Dragon-type Pokemon in Johto with Kingdra, and she's got one on her team, so they didn't miss the mark here. And she didn't cheat like Lance did by having impossible Dragonites on her team. She's fine, I guess. I can't really think of a way to improve her team. And Blackthorn City is home to the Dragon Tamer clan, of which Claire is a member. Therefore, I think she fits perfectly here. All in all, the gym leaders make for great representatives for the leadership here in Johto. Each of them is unique and seem to be right at home in their respective towns and cities. However, they all overutilize Kanto Pokemon, with some of them having full teams of Kantomons. I mean, I hate this about Johto, and hate is a strong word. I don't use it lightly here. There were opportunities to add Johto Pokemon to the teams of every single gym leader in the region, with the exception of maybe Whitney and Claire. And HeartGold and SoulSilver did not improve upon this until after you've beaten the game. I mean, sure, Gen 4 gave Claire a Gyarados instead of 3 Dragonair, and that's great, but she didn't need the improvement as bad as the rest of the Johto gym leaders did. If I could pick one word to sum up the teams of the gym leaders here in Johto, it would be disappointment. It makes me sad to know that Johto Pokemon are getting such poor representation, even on a Pokemon League level. All of them deserved better, the gym leaders and the Pokemon of Johto. But to give credit where credit is due, in Gen 4 you can rematch the gym leaders once you've beaten the game. Each gym leader is away from their gym on at least one day of the week, and if you can find them while they're out, they'll give you their phone number to register in the Pokegear. After that, you can call them up, and depending on what day and time it is, you can challenge them to a rematch at the Fighting Dojo in Saffron City in Kanto. Now, The rematch teams are pretty great, and I really like them, as they include Pokemon from Gens 1 through 4 and have an awesome variety of Pokemon on their teams. And while this improvement is pretty cool, it doesn't exactly make up for the fact that the gym leaders' original teams are so disappointing. Moving on to the next subcategory. Elite Four. Please note that this subcategory will also include the champion of the region, but it's easier to just lump that in with the Elite Four for brevity's sake. I didn't cover the champion in Kanto because the champion was the player's rival, Blue, but looking back on it now, I kind of feel like I should have, and I'm going to start from here moving forward. And I actually really like most of the Elite Four here in Johto. It's important to note that Johto shares the Indigo Plateau with Kanto, so you may see some Kanto influence here. And if you thought that the issue of Johtomon representation would be improved upon with the Johto Elite Four, then you'd be right. The Johto Elite Four consist of Will, Koga, Bruno, Karen, and Lance as the champion. As you can see, 3 of the 5 were introduced in Kanto, with only Will and Karen being new additions. Will is a Psychic-type specialist, and his team is pretty good. Though I would switch out his Slowbro for a Slowking, as the latter was introduced in Johto, and it shares the same typing. I would also exchange one of his repeat Satu for a Girafarig, and boom, perfect team. However, that's not the case, and his team still requires better Johto representation. Next up is Karen. She is awesome, and I love her, and I'm granting her immunity from Karen status here in the real world. She's a Dark-type specialist, and her team is pretty solid. She does have some Kanto Pokemon on her team, being Gengar and Vileplume. However, every member of her team are Pokemon from evolutionary lines that are only available or evolve at nighttime, so they all fit really well with her dark theme. Personally, I still think her Vileplume could be swapped out for Tyranitar, but I won't knock her team for keeping its thematic consistency with Vileplume. I really like Karen. She's probably my favorite Elite Four member from the Johto games. But what I really find interesting about the Johto Elite Four is the addition of Koga, the Poison-type specialist. Y'all remember Koga, right? He was a gym leader in Kanto, but got promoted to the Elite Four here in Johto, and his daughter, Janine, assumed his role as gym leader in Fuchsia City. I think that is so cool, and his team is great. Granted, Fortress isn't a poison type, but it kind of reminds me of a smoke ball, items that ninjas use to conceal their location.
Don't go ninja, nobody don't need ninja, alrighty?
It also doesn't feel out of place on his team. Maybe it's because he has other bug types on his team or something, but I certainly won't knock him for having it. Not to mention, he's got other Johtomons on his team like Crobat and Ariados. I really like Koga's team, and he does a great job of portraying that this place is home to both Kanto and Johto leaders. He is the perfect representation for the Kanto side, and I love that they gave him extra lore by having Janine run his old gym. One of the representatives of the Kanto side that I don't like here is Bruno. It's not that I have an issue with Bruno as an Elite Four member, it's just that we already have a fighting-type gym leader with Chuck, so we really didn't need another fighting-type Elite Four member. He only uses a Hitmontop on his team for Johto Pokemon representation, but that's not really an issue since he's based in Kanto anyway. Although Koga had Johtomon, so I'm not sure why I'm making excuses for Bruno. If they wanted to keep a Kanto leader in the Elite Four, I would have preferred someone like, well, none of Kanto's Elite Four members, but maybe Brock, Misty, or Lieutenant Surge, since Johto did introduce a fair amount of rock, water, and electric types that wouldn't have been used on any of the other members' teams. I think Misty would be my personal pick. She could have a team of Starmie, Quagsire, Lantern, Politoed, and Golduck. Finally, let's go over Lance, the new champion of Johto. He's got a team of Gyarados, Charizard, Aerodactyl, and 3 Dragonites. I get it, they all look like dragons, and y'all made sure to let me know in the comments of my Johto region review that his whole thing is apparently sky dragons while Claire has aquatic dragons. That's cool by me, because the champion of the region doesn't have to have a specific type. If Blue and Cynthia can have a mix of Pokemon, so can every other champion. I do think that the Elite Four should kinda stick to their type specialties for the most part, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. However, the champion of the region is exempt from this as far as I'm concerned. But I still have an issue with Lance's team. His Dragonites are all still illegal. Dragonair does not evolve until level 55, and all of his Dragonites are below that level. But he doesn't have too many other Dragon-type options other than Kingdra, but it's a better fit for Claire in my opinion. I really don't know how to fix his team, honestly. I don't like the 3 repeat Dragonites or the fact that they are illegal, but I can't really think of a better solution. So I don't like it, but I can't do nothing about it, so it's fine, I guess. Anyway, that covers the Elite Four and Champions, so let's move on to the next subcategory. Trainer classes. Like the Elite Four, the trainer classes should represent the types of people that reside in the region, and I don't want to delve into every single trainer class, only the ones who fit here really well or the ones who don't belong here at all. However, most of Johto's trainer classes are pretty generic, and there aren't many standouts, good or bad. As a matter of fact, the only classes that don't fit into Johto well are maybe the Fire Breather and Juggler class, but there's very few of those in the region anyway. They just seem very clown-ish, and I don't think they mesh well with the historic and traditional vibe of the region. You could argue that since Johto also incorporates some modern characteristics into its themes, that they could theoretically belong here, but I think that is better represented by the super nerds and scientists like they did in Kanto. I don't really think clowns and jugglers are very modern anyway. Maybe you could argue that entertainment is big in Johto with the Pokeathlon Dome or the dance theater, but these clowns still don't feel justified to be here by even those means. To me, these entertainers just don't fit particularly well into the Johto region. However, there are 3 trainer classes that exude Johto vibes, and those would be the Kimono Girls, the Sages, and the Executives. As mentioned earlier, Kimono Girls play a substantial role in the region's storyline. They have a unique connection to Johto's history and the legends that form the foundation of the region. While you only engage in battles with 5 of them in the dance theater, each accompanied by an Eevee evolution, their limited presence doesn't diminish their impact. The Kimono Girl trainer class fits the Johto setting so perfectly, and I really appreciate their inclusion. Another trainer class that fits really well into Johto would be the Sage trainer class. I've referred to them previously in this review as monks because that's what their aesthetics lean towards. They can be found in a few historic locations around Johto, like Sprout Tower and the Ekrutique Gym in Gen 2. The Sage trainers fit nicely into Johto because they blend with the region's history and traditional atmosphere. Their inclusion provides a sense of Johto's deep traditions and old wisdom. They are perfect for this region. Finally, I like that the Executives were included in Johto. Now, in Gen 2, they are just called Rocket Executives, but in Gen 4, they are fully developed characters: Archer, Proton, Petrol, and Ariana. And I really like their inclusion here. The Rocket Executives are the highest ranking Team Rocket members below Giovanni, and someone had to hold down the fort and try to maintain the dignity of the crime syndicate while Giovanni was away, and these 4 stepped up to the plate while showing off their strength in their new titles as Team Rocket Executives. They fit wonderfully into the storyline, and I'm glad that this trainer class made it into the games. So for gym leaders, Elite 4, and trainer classes, I'm giving Gen 2, Gen 4, and ultimately Johto overall a score of 3. In other words, I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Okay, I hate the gym leaders teams. While the gym leaders all represent Johto really well in their aesthetics and type specialties, their teams do absolutely zero justice for Johto Pokemon representation. You are a gym leader of Johto. Don't you think you should have Pokemon from Johto as well? Apparently not, and they're the reason this score had no chance of being higher than a 3. Game Freak dropped the ball big time with Johto gym leaders, and I'm not afraid to call them out for it. And sure, Gen 4 allowed for gym leader rematches, but that doesn't excuse the sheer amount of squandered opportunities from their original teams. And had they got it right the first time, I wouldn't have so much to complain about here. But on the flip side, the Elite 4 is pretty awesome, with Will, Karen, and Koga doing a fine job of representing the Johto Mons, as well as making it known that the Pokemon League is shared between Johto and Kanto. Bruno was a mistaken inclusion if you ask me, and Lance's team is not my favorite, but they aren't the worst thing in the world. The gym leaders teams are. Anyway, the trainer classes in Johto are fairly generic, but the Kimono Girls, the Sages, and the Executives are fantastic inclusions to the roster. The Fire Breathers and Jugglers don't really fit, but they too aren't the worst thing in the world. The gym leaders teams are. I think I've said enough. Let's move on, shall we? Naturally occurring phenomena. I said this in my Kanto region review, and it's worth repeating here. Naturally occurring phenomena refers to the processes that would occur in nature, like weather, a day-night cycle, seasons, and established days of the week. Scoring this category is pretty straightforward. Game Freak either included these mechanics or they didn't. Achieving a perfect score in this category will be challenging for any region unless all mechanics are present and serve a purpose. And weather must exist in the overworld, not just via in-battle moves. While we can assume that all of the regions have time, seasons, and weather, assumptions won't help it score. Say it with me, kids. If you cannot experience it while you are in the region itself, then the region doesn't get points for it. Yay! So the cool thing about Johto is that in Gen 2, the day-night cycle was introduced. Additionally, days of the week are incorporated into the games, and the in-game clock mirrors real-world time if input correctly. The time of day and day of the week play a very significant role in Johto. Some Pokemon can only be caught during certain times of the day, and some Pokemon can only be caught on a specific day of the week, like Lapras that can only be found in Union Cave on Fridays. There are also other activities that are time-based. In Pokemon Crystal, if you have Camper Todd's phone number registered, he'll occasionally contact you about a rooftop sale happening on the rooftop lookout of the Goldenrod department store. The SS Aqua ferries players between Olivine and Vermilion on certain days of the week. Certain radio programs can only be tuned into during certain times of the day, and the day of the week siblings will appear around Johto on different days of the week. The Goldenrod Lottery changes out its prizes each day in Gen 4, as well as the prizes at the Pokeathlon Dome. The bug catching contest only runs on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. The shops in the Goldenrod Underground also change depending on the day. In Gen 4, Balba, he will give you more decorative items the more days you play in the game. And these items will allow the player to encounter new Pokemon in the Safari Zone depending on how the zones are decorated. So there's plenty of content that depends on the time of day and day of the week. However, in Gen 2, weather hasn't quite yet been introduced, but it is available in Gen 4. Now, there are only certain routes that will rain, like Route 33 and the Lake of Rage, but there's one weather type that exists in Johto that is pretty rare. New Bark Town is described in the games as being windy, and in Gen 4 there are animations that definitely show that this place is windy. You don't really see this form of weather very often in the games prior to the Switch era, so I think this inclusion is really awesome. And while wind doesn't serve much of a purpose, it certainly makes the overworld feel more immersive. This is also evident on top of the Bell Tower and at the summit of Mount Silver, and it adds so much ambiance to these places, and it's a welcome inclusion. However, rain in the Gen 4 games does serve a purpose, not only because it affects in-battle weather, it also plays a big part at the Lake of Rage. It will rain at the lake every day of the week except Wednesday, and on most days the lake is flooded, which allows the player to access the house at the back of the lake. Once you defeat Team Rocket in Mahogany Town, it'll stop raining on Wednesdays, and the water level will be slightly lower, giving the player access to hidden items. Now, seasons aren't a thing at all in Gen 2, but Gen 4 has some areas in the game that kind of feel seasonal. Like I said in the Kanto region review, there is only one Pokemon region that allows the player to experience seasons properly, but if a region has areas that feel kinda seasonal, the region will get at least some credit for that. However, the credit they receive will not be as substantial as it would have been if seasons were fully realized. Now, there are only two areas that really feel seasonal, and that's the Bell Chime Trail and Mount Silver's Mountainside. The Bell Chime Trail just exudes autumnal vibes, and I absolutely love this little spot in the games. It's small, but so impactful to me. And remember earlier in the review when I referred to the taiga biome at Mount Silver? Well, that area kind of feels like wintertime, so I'll give Johto a small bone for including those two little spots. I suppose the remainder of the region is likely supposed to feel like spring, given all of the flowers and water around the region, including standing puddles. But I'm not sure that I can give out credit for that, since it isn't directly evident in the games, only generally implied by me. I don't know, guys, I'm trying here. So, for naturally occurring phenomena, I'm giving Gen 2 a score of 3.5, Gen 4 a score of 4.5, leaving Johto overall with a score of 4. Gen 4 meets just about all of the naturally occurring phenomena criteria for a perfect score, but the weather here is a little infrequent and sporadic, and since it didn't fully commit to seasons or had a substantial amount of seasonal areas, it can't really receive a 5, but it got pretty close. In Gen 2, time and days of the week are important new features, and considering their meaningful impact on the gameplay with a wealth of associated content, I feel I've credited Gen 2 accordingly. Alright, next category. Music and sound design. The music in a Pokemon game has the power to influence our emotions as we explore the various facets of the region. Whether strolling through the serene atmosphere of a quaint town, embarking on an epic journey along a route, or delving into the mysterious depths of a cave, the region's melodies provide a backdrop to these experiences. These compositions don't just serve as background noise, and if done well, they capture the essence and character of each location, evoking a sense of connection that we all collectively carry with us after our adventure ends. The music in Pokemon games are an integral part of the overall experience, and it shapes the way we feel about the region and exploring it. In Johto, you don't get the sense of embarking on a perilous adventure from the start. The music, especially in the early parts of the game, exudes a sense of happiness and enthusiasm. Actually, the music in Johto in general isn't particularly grandiose. It's more about joy, relaxation, and excitement. The The music in the towns and cities feels airy, uplifting, and serene. Cherry Grove, for instance, is a place where you can pause, breathe in the floral fragrances, and unwind. Violet City's themes present the feeling of being in a small, content little city without much hustle and bustle. Azalea Town and Blackthorn's music stands out as one of my all-time favorite themes in the Pokemon series. Every time I visit Azalea Town, I am so reluctant to leave. It feels like a place where I'd love to settle down and live a peaceful, happy, slow-paced life for the rest of my years. Honestly, I kinda even prefer the Gen 2 version of Azalea's theme, but Gen 4's version sounds amazing as well. Interestingly, even when we explore the larger and more contemporary cities of Johto, such as Goldenrod, Olivine, and Ecruteak, the music doesn't really convey a fast-paced or electric vibe. It's almost as if the music is gently suggesting that these cities aren't centers of rapid living and commotion. Instead, they remain inviting places where you can leisurely savor the city's offerings. Ecruteak especially, though Cyanwood also fittingly shares its theme. The music on the routes feel encouraging, like you're on a steady and purposeful journey. When traversing the caves, the tunes evoke a sense of cold darkness and looming danger. In places like Sprout Tower, the Burn Tower, and Tin Tower, the music carries a cautious tone with subtle Asian cultural influences that immerse players in a historical atmosphere. The dance theater beautifully encapsulates Johto's cultural themes, while the music in the ruins of Alph share the cave themes but adds an eerie, echoing quality that makes you feel like you're being watched or followed. In Gen 4, Routes 47 and 48 introduce us to some absolutely beautiful melodies, like you're strolling on the most scenic routes in the game, likely because you are. These songs are so amazing, and I'm so glad Game Freak decided to create them for these routes. Yet, one of the most captivating locations to visit, if only for the musical experience it offers, is National Park. The music in this location is extraordinarily soothing, bordering on melancholic. It's not really sadness, but rather a profound sense of relaxation and elation that damn near brings me to tears. And this is particularly exemplified in the Gen 4 version. Let's all take a moment to savor this musical masterpiece. And finally, Gen 4 introduced some fantastic ambiance around the region. You can hear the creaking and swaying of the pillars in both Sprout Tower and the Bell Tower. The pitter-patter of the player's footsteps add to the immersion of exploration. The strong winds atop the Bell Tower and Mount Silver really make you feel like you're at an uncomfortable and intimidating altitude. If you didn't feel fully immersed in Johto in Gen 2, you certainly can in Gen 4. Even though ambiance doesn't necessarily make or break the score of a region, I still wanted to add it in here because it does make an impact in Gen 4 for sure. So for music and sound design, I'm once again giving both Gen 2, Gen 4, and Johto overall an absolutely perfect score of 5. Johto's music is filled with joy, tranquility, encouragement, cultural richness, and an open invitation to enjoy yourself. It seems to whisper, relax, leisurely discover this land at your own pace. Breathe in the fresh air, savor your stroll through these locales, immerse yourself in the city's legends and tales, all while the music ensures you are never hurried or rushed along. Even inside the caves, the music seems to encourage you not to move too quickly, as it's dangerous here. Have caution, be careful. But regardless, the Johto region's music has some of the most memorable and enjoyable melodies that makes the region feel comfortable. I think maybe that's why I love Johto's music so much. And maybe this is me inserting too much subjectivity here for this review, but this is exactly the kind of music I want to hear when I play a game. Maybe it's because I love slower games like Animal Crossing, Story of Seasons, Stardew Valley, and Spiritfarer that all give you this free license to take your time and do as you please. That's exactly how I feel when I play through a Johto game, especially in HeartGold and SoulSilver. I suppose that the music and sound design would be the category where I'm most compelled to give my subjective opinion because, well, everyone's opinion on music is subjective, not just mine. And if I'm being totally transparent, the music from Johto as a whole is the coziest and easiest for me to return to of all of the Pokemon games. I absolutely love it. And that concludes the overview of Johto. Whew, that felt like a journey. Anyway, after tallying up the scores for the different categories of this review, Generation 2 comes out with a final score of 3.75. Generation 4 comes out with a final score of 4.35, and the Johto region's final score is 4.05. These scores are a little wonky wonk, and these numbers kind of make my brain unhappy, so just for fun and unofficially, let's round Johto's overall score down to 4 as the 0.05 doesn't really make an impactful difference. We can also give some bonus points to the generations. Gen 2 can go up to a score of 4, and Gen 4 can go up to a score of 4.5. This is mainly because there is a wealth of content to explore in Kanto after finishing Johto, and while it didn't get covered in this review because it's not technically part of Johto, I still feel like giving the Gen 2 and Gen 4 games credit for the exploratory incentives would be acceptable, and while this adjustment won't change Johto's final overall score, it just makes the scores look neater for my Quagsire brain. I realize that it might be a bit strange to add points for this reason, or for any reason for that matter, but you have the original scores as reference. As a matter of fact, pick your score. I don't care which one you choose. If you like the original scores of 3.75 for Gen 2, 4.35 for Gen 4, and 4.05 for Johto overall, they're the original and correct scores, so you'd be right in accepting them as they are. But if you like extra credit and less wonky numbers, you are also allowed to accept the unofficial scores of 4 for Gen 2, 4.5 for Gen 4, and 4 for Johto overall. Maybe I shouldn't have included 0.5s or half points in my review, but I really felt like I needed to, so wonky numbers it is, I guess. All in all, Johto is a joyous region to visit and explore. The layout of the region feels interesting, and while there aren't too many large biomes to explore, the region truly highlights the biomes it does offer. Everywhere you look, Johto's distinctive character shines through, embracing a blend of rural charm, rich history, tradition, cultural influences, all thoughtfully intertwined with gradual modernization. From Azalea to Goldenrod, and from Olivine to Ecruteak, everything snaps perfectly into place within Johto's themes. And there's no singular way to explore Johto either, with the routes offering branching paths, the caves never forcing you to make tiring treks, the forests and parks giving you multiple nooks and crannies to explore, and the special interiors piquing your interest to take a deeper look into these historic locations. You may find yourself leisurely exploring Johto with your favorite Pokemon by your side every step of the way. There's never a dull moment in Johto. It beckons you to revisit this place time and time again, and in the morning, afternoon, and night to truly taste the flavors of everything it begs to serve you. There is absolutely no shortage of things to do, places to explore, items to gather, and entertainment to indulge in. But luxury and exploration aren't all there is to Johto. There's a deep-rooted history to this place whose foundations stood hundreds of years before the very pavement you walk upon. Johto's settlements are steeped in ancient legends, folklore, and tradition, and while Johto's newly introduced Pokemon are uncommon and poorly represented within its territory and its leadership, they sure are an exciting find if you take the time to explore the unique mechanics of the games. And the melodies accompanying your journey in Johto beckon you to unwind, appreciate the beauty of your surroundings, savor every moment, and fully immerse yourself into this place. And if you do, you just might discover a glorious world brimming with tranquility and adventure, making your Johto experience truly unforgettable. Anyway, that's going to be it for this Johto review. What did you think about the review? I worked so hard on it, and I'm sorry to have to split it up into multiple parts, but it was literally double the size of the Kanto region review, so I kinda had no other choice. Otherwise, I'd have to leave y'all with nothing to watch for another few weeks, and I didn't really want to do that. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, please leave me a like and subscribe to see more region reviews like this. Also, leave me your comments down below. I'm excited to read y'all's opinions. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!